Inside a packed Massachusetts courtroom, the lights seem too bright. A jury leans forward as a state trooper reads one search after another. On the screen behind him, chilling phrases from a Google history appear. Questions about bodies, about cleaning, about whether you can be charged without a body. In the defendant chair sits Ana Walshe, hands folded, listening. He is accused of killing his wife, Ana Walshe, on New Year's Day 2023. Prosecutors say those searches reveal a calculated plan and a cold cleanup. His lawyers insist they show something different, a panicked cover-up after a sudden death. Tonight, we are walking through that timeline together, step by step. This is the case of Brian and Ana Walshe, and the internet searches that may decide a murder trial. Hey, I am Tim B, and welcome back to True Crime Animator Studio. This video involves real-world violence and a missing mother of 3. We will not show or describe anything graphic, but the details can still be upsetting. Please take care of yourself as you watch, and remember you can pause anytime. Let us start with Ana, before she became a headline and a hashtag. Ana Walshe was born in Belgrade and grew up dreaming of a bigger life. She moved to the United States in her early 20s, chasing opportunity. Friends say she was driven, warm, and fiercely loyal to the people she loved. By 2016, Ana had married Brian Walshe, and they settled in Cohasset, Massachusetts. They would go on to have 3 young sons, close in age and full of energy. Ana built a successful career in real estate, eventually working in Washington, D.C. She spent weekdays in the city and weekends back home with Brian and the boys. From the outside, it looked like a family living the immigrant version of the American dream. Behind the scenes, there were cracks forming in that picture-perfect life. Brian was already in serious legal trouble over an art fraud scheme involving fake paintings. He was on house arrest, facing federal sentencing, and money was tight and uncertain. According to prosecutors, the marriage was under pressure from finances, distance, and secrets. In court, we heard about messages showing Ana confiding in another man about her feelings. Prosecutors say she had started a romantic relationship and was thinking about a different future. They also say Brian knew he was not just at risk of prison, but of losing Ana and the kids. In late December, Ana allegedly told friends she was worried about what was coming next. New Year's Eve, 2022. The Walshes shared dinner at home with a friend of Brian. Photos from that night show Ana smiling in a sparkly dress, leaning in close. It looks like any other celebration, but we now know what was just days away. After midnight, as the new year began, Ana tried to reach family back in Serbia. She called her mother, her sister, and her maid of honor, but no one picked up. It is the last verified time we know she was trying to connect with loved ones. According to the timeline, Ana was last seen at home in the early hours of New Year's Day. Brian would later tell police she left for an emergency work trip to Washington, D.C. He said she ordered a rideshare to the airport and walked out before dawn. But there were no rideshare records, no security footage, and no boarding pass scans. Days passed, and Ana did not show up for work or call in to explain. It was actually her employer who first reported her missing on January 4th. Around the same time, Brian also contacted police to say he could not reach her. When officers checked, they learned Ana had a ticket for a later flight she never used. Her phone stopped pinging, and her credit cards were silent after New Year's Day. Right away, something about Brian's story was not adding up for investigators. Brian was supposed to be on strict home confinement because of the fraud case. He claimed he had run errands with the kids at certain times on New Year's Day. When police pulled surveillance footage, they could not verify those trips. They did, however, find video from a hardware store on January 2nd. In that footage, a man they say is Brian buys cleaning supplies and tarps with cash. Investigators say he spent hundreds of dollars on mops, buckets, tape, and drop cloths. Back at the house in Cohasset, a search team went down into the basement. There, they reported finding traces of blood and a damaged, bloody knife. Outside the home, trash runs had already been collected and hauled away. Detectives began racing the clock to track those bags before they were destroyed. The trail led them to a transfer station, and then to a waste facility. There, they opened bags that, according to prosecutors, carried items linked to Ana. Inside, investigators say they found cutting tools, a Tyvek suit, and rubber gloves. They also found a handbag, boots, and a vaccination card that appeared to be Ana. Testing later showed Ana DNA on certain items, tying those bags back to the house. Even with all that, one thing was still missing. Ana remains have never been found. That is where the Google searches come in, and why they dominate this trial. Investigators seized devices from the home, including a laptop and a child tablet. When they pulled the history, they say a pattern of searches jumped out. Many of them were made in the hours after Ana was last seen alive. Prosecutors say that very early on New Year's morning, Brian went online. They allege he searched about the best ways to dispose of a body. He also allegedly looked up how long it takes before a body begins to smell. Other searches, prosecutors say, asked about cleaning blood from floors and concrete. Later entries included questions about whether someone can be charged without a body. There were also searches about disposing of remains in trash and landfills. Jurors heard that some of these searches were done on a tablet used by the kids. In court, a state trooper read them out loud, one after another. The courtroom grew very quiet as each phrase appeared on the screen. To the prosecution, this history is the heart of their case. They argue these searches show Brian planning not just a cleanup, but a killing. They point to the timing, starting before dawn on New Year's Day. They highlight that Ana was supposed to travel later, not suddenly that morning. They also say Brian stood to gain from a life insurance policy in her name. Reports say Ana had coverage worth more than $2.7 million. Brian was the sole beneficiary, according to what jurors have been told. Prosecutors argue that between money, legal pressure, and a failing marriage, motive was building. They also point to prior allegations that Ana once told police Brian had threatened her. Even though that earlier report did not lead to charges, it now echoes in this trial. Put together, the state says, the searches and the physical evidence tell one story. They claim Brian killed Ana, dismembered her, and tried to erase every trace. But that is not the story Brian's defense team is asking jurors to believe. His lawyers admit that he lied to police and mishandled Ana's body. They say he has already pleaded guilty to misleading investigators and to moving her remains. In their version, Ana's death was sudden and unexplained in the early hours of New Year's Day. They say Brian woke up around 2:30 in the morning and found her lifeless in bed. According to the defense, he panicked, thinking no one would believe he was innocent. They point out his fraud conviction, his house arrest, and the strain the family was under. They argue he made terrible illegal choices, but that none of it proves he committed murder. On the searches, the defense offers a very different interpretation. They say Brian was frantically looking up what to do after discovering Ana dead. In their telling, the questions about bodies, smell, and charges came from fear, not planning. Jurors have watched both sides cross-examine the trooper who pulled the search records. The defense has questioned whether timestamps and device sharing leave room for doubt. They have also reminded the jury that there is no body and no official cause of death. Medical experts cannot take the stand and say definitively how or when Ana died. Without remains, there is no autopsy, and that absence hangs over the entire case. At the same time, prosecutors say the digital trail is as powerful as any fingerprint. They describe it as a window into Brian's thoughts in the exact hours Ana vanished. In the wider world, that clash of narratives has exploded online. Clips of the Google searches being read in court are everywhere on social media. Some people say the searches alone make this clearly premeditated. Others argue that while the behavior is disturbing, it might still fit a panicked cover-up. Commenters are debating what digital evidence should count as proof beyond a reasonable doubt. Meanwhile, every day, In that dead courtroom, witnesses take the stand. Friends and co-workers have painted a picture of Anna's life and her plans for the future. One man has testified about a romantic relationship he shared with her before she disappeared. Investigators have walked jurors through phone records, surveillance, and those trash searches. Forensic experts have talked about DNA, trace evidence, and what can and cannot be proven. Anna's 3 young sons are not in the room, but they are never far from anyone's mind. They are now living without their mother, and with their father facing life in prison, if convicted. The judge has reminded jurors that Brian is presumed innocent, unless and until proven guilty. The charge he faces, first-degree murder, requires proof of intent and malice. The jury will also consider the counts he has already admitted, including improper handling of a body. As of early December 2025, there is no verdict in this case. Brian continues to maintain that he did not kill Anna or intend her death. What is certain is that he has admitted to dismantling her body and lying to investigators. Those choices, whether born of guilt or panic, are now center stage in this trial. For Anna's family in Serbia and here in the United States, answers remain painfully incomplete. They do not have a grave or a clear picture of her final moments. What they do have is a courtroom, a stack of exhibits, and a world watching online. This case also raises bigger questions about technology and our private searches. Most of us type fears and fantasies into a search bar, assuming they stay between us and the screen. In a homicide investigation, those late-night queries can become the loudest witnesses. In Brian's case, prosecutors believe his searches draw the outline of an invisible crime scene. The defense insists they show a man spiraling after a tragedy he did not cause. In the end, 12 jurors will decide which story the evidence supports. They will have to separate shock from proof and horror from legal guilt. As viewers, we have the luxury of stepping back and remembering the human core of this case. Anna was a daughter, a friend, a colleague, and a mother who loved her children. Her life was more than the way she went missing or the searches made after. If you are following this trial, try to hold space for her and for her boys. And remember that behind every viral clip, there is a family still living the aftermath. Thank you for spending this time with me and for approaching this case with compassion. If you learned something or want to follow more in-depth breakdowns of trials like this, please consider subscribing to the channel and turning on notifications. Let me know in the comments what you think about digital evidence like search history. Do you feel it is enough to prove intent, or should jurors be more cautious? Keep your comments respectful, especially toward Anna's loved ones and the children. I am Tim B. This is True Crime Animator Studio. See you soon.